I have is why? Failing a drug screen is not a crime. So why are we referring them to the juvenile court system? And so I push that off on Earl. Earl, if you would please.
Sure, I'll just say this, there's a statute, 49-6-42-13, that is specifically, it's part of the School Security Act of 1981. And there's some language in there that authorizes this type of random drugs testing for students in extracurricular activities. And there's a code section here. It says, before a drug testing program is implemented in any LEA, the local Board of Education in that LEA shall establish policies, procedures, and guidelines to implement this section within the district. The State Board of Education shall prepare a model policy, procedure, and guidelines that may be adopted by the local Board of Education. Now, I looked up that model policy, and I think where this question really comes from is probably in this testing policy. Under the penalty section of that model state board policy, it says each confirmed incident will result in a referral to the youth services officer, which essentially is the juvenile court system. So I think that's probably, or at least maybe one place where that specific language came from. I frankly agree with Ms. Boston from the standpoint that my first thought was, well, what does the youth services officer do in that circumstance? Now, I don't know practically what has been taking place. Now, my understanding is that you had a conversation with Bo
And Marcia.
And that there is, I guess, my limited understanding of the situation, because I've not had a chance really to look into it from a practical standpoint. My understanding is that when we have a student that is sent to that youth services officer, that there is some counseling maybe provided. It's not necessarily something where they're saying, well, we're going to put you on probation because you tested positive for this substance. I think it's viewed more as a preventative type, measure. But from a practical standpoint, the feeling you get when you look at that policy is, well, that means they're going to be in trouble, with the juvenile court system. I don't, know that that's actually the case, or that it even could be the case, because, like you said, that probably doesn't fall under what a delinquent act is under the statute. Typically, that's violating a crime, violating a statute that if you were an adult would be a crime. And like you said, just testing positive for a substance is not necessarily the same as simple possession or, something along those lines. So I think we need to know a little bit more maybe about what does happen really when a student gets referred to the youth services officer in this kind of context. And maybe also it might not be a terrible idea to maybe look at the language in this policy and maybe clarify what the board's intention is with regard to that referral to the juvenile court system.
In furtherance of this, I'm going to make a motion to send this policy back to the policy committee so that we can get some more information. And I'm not opposed to the wording, the student will be referred to the youth services officer. But to refer it to the juvenile court system, there's no reason. I mean, there's no basis.
It would leave you scratching your head a little bit, I would think, if you were, say, the juvenile judge, or anybody from the district attorney's office, they might be, well, what does that mean? What are we supposed to do? That was my first thought, is if I put myself in those shoes, well, okay, we've been referred, so now what?
So what do you do? So if I would make a motion that we send it back to the policy committee to look at the language, to let Earl further investigate what transpires and what needs to transpire.
Okay, I've got a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I have a second?
Question.
Discussion, yes.
So, Mr. Brock, did this verbiage did you just take it right out of what the state statute was?
It has been in the policy, existing policy for some time. It's
I will
nothing.
say, this policy
nothing.
language, I participated in the drafting of this policy, and it has been a number of years ago.
Well, and there's no legal reference to give us a statute.
Well, I agree, that this statute should be put in, and this state board policy should be
Well,
referenced.
that's part one of my question, so to finish my question. So, what was the change that brought it back to?
Actually, the change is just to extend who from the central office can participate. It was a school administrator, and now we added designee just in case the principal was not available. And
So you just modernized it?
Brought that up to date. But another thing that was added to that, and I want to point this out, if you'll look at page 3 of this, the blue on the screen, it says, if the student tests negative beyond the retention time, the student may return to normal extracurricular activity participation. Now, that was an addition there where we've taken someone who may have had some missteps in the past, but we're saying, okay, you're good now. So if we do table this, which we're certainly open to further study, you are taking away this particular benefit to a student who maybe had a problem in the past.
Thank you for clarifying.
All right, is there any further discussion? Ms. Boston, you want to stick with your motion?
I do. I
Okay.
think that is a total misconception of what I don't know that we can send to the juvenile court system, and for what purpose.
Right, I understand that, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, but Mr. Brock?
It's my feeling that the policy should go through simply to make sure that a student does have some protection there with the addition, and then refer it back to the policy committee for, with Mr. Patton, or with your input and your help, for possible rewording those two sentences,
And I'm okay with that.
which we could possibly do this if everything falls into place in the next August policy committee meeting.
If
And then
Okay.
all we would be doing is perhaps doing a correction with the wording, and maybe even do a first and second reading and have this in place, because we are talking about a lot of athletes, club participants. We want to get this clearly stated as early in the school year as possible.
Okay, if I make a motion to approve this policy,
Well, hang on just a second. We've already got a motion
I
to
know. but I'll
table it.
amend
Okay,
my motion.
okay. How you want to amend it?
I can.
Yeah.
Let's think this through.
Okay.
If I amend my motion to approve this policy with the wording as it is now, and then refer it back to the policy committee to look at number 4 in the second and the third offense.
Okay.
Would you amend your
I don't know who
second?
seconded
I would amend my second.
Okay.
Okay.
I can do
I
that.
think
So-
the committee
so-
will find that.
So basically, you're withdrawing
I'll
your
withdraw
original...
my original motion.
Okay.
Or I'll amend my original motion.
Well, I think we'd have to withdraw it
Okay.
because it's completely different. It's a completely different motion.
I'll withdraw.
Withdraw your motion. Will you withdraw your second?
I will.
Okay, and now you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve it as is and refer it back to the policy committee to look at number 4 and number 3 in the second and third offense, the wording or the intent, and give Earl an opportunity to look at that. And refer it back to the policy committee to look at.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do you want to second that again?
Second.
Okay, we'll second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Now, we're voting to send this, to pass this as it is, but to send it back to the policy committee for revisions if needed.
The revision, and I'm just gonna, Tony, since you're on the policy committee,
Ma'am.
Chairman, the legal references and the cross references need to be in there as well, so that when we have an issue, we know where this information came from.
And we're going to make use of our esteemed attorney to do just that, Ms. Boston, and I assure you.
And then Ms. Boston will shut up. I'm good.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That, we've got that one taken care of.
Well done. You'd have had fun at the policy committee meeting. We have this kind of discussion frequently. Okay, if that wasn't cloudy enough, let's, if you will, let's take a look at our suggestion for second reading of policies. And to tell you the truth,
Well, wait a minute.
See what happens?
We've not,
that's right.
we've not done the 4.600 yet.
The grading is 4.600.
Yeah, but he said we was going to look at second reading.
Well,
So he's
it
got
was
me
up for first and second
second
reading, so
yes.
we could discuss that
Yes.
under this category.
Yes.
These are our recommendations for first and second reading. They are time sensitive simply because they need to be in place as quickly as possible before the school year starts. So we want to make sure that we're as ready for those students as we can possibly be. And it is our recommendation for Policy 4.502, Parent and Family Engagement, Policy 4.600, Grading System, and Policy 6.405 for first and second reading. But I've already had a request for discussion for Policy 4.600 for discussion. Are there any of the other policies up for first and second reading that anyone on this board would like to discuss before voting? All right, so my intent is
Okay.
to pull for consideration at this point in time, policy 4.600.
Okay.
And
right.
the others, unless there is a need for discussion, to move these along.
All right, I'm the one that asked for the discussion on the 4.600. Now, state law says that we have to change our grading policy for 9 through 12. It does not say that we have to do that for 3 through 8.
You are correct.
But it's my opinion that if we're going to do this grading scale for 9 through 12, that we ought to do the same grading scale for 3 through 8, just to be consistent.
Mr. Chair, I have some documents to pass down your way.
All right.
That's okay.
Yes.
There's 2 documents to this. There's a front one that has just kind of a generalization that I have, and then it'll go to the TSBA, or the Tennessee State Board of Education Uniform Grading Policy. And then I have something highlighted there for part of the discussion while we're discussing this, and then the current policy, but that's on it's on the screen, so we probably won't need that last set, but I just want to share that with you. Do we need more copies?
There's this and this.
Here's another set.
We'll need
Could
another.
be two
Yeah.
stapled things together that was handed down, so. Just for part of the discussion.
I mean, that sounds reasonable, right?
Well, I just feel like,
Has anybody spoken to what our elementary people think? Do we have our elementary supervisor present?
we got elementary principals all over the building.
Dr. Farley is here.
Okay, guys, come on. Now's your turn to speak. What do you, Becky, what are they saying, Ms. Farley?
The question would be the grades 3 through 8 grading policy. Do we want to follow the high school uniform policy, or do we want to stay with what we currently have normed for each of the elementary schools for grade 3 through 8?
I haven't had the opportunity to see the principals until this week, so I haven't had an opportunity to
So that puts the principals on the spot. Come on, Christie.
I feel like we need to stay consistent. If the high school's going to use that grading scale, I feel like we need to use the same grading scale as the high school for consistency.
Okay. Any other principal want to speak up? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I agree with Christie. I think it needs to be uniform.
Uniform.
Ms. Thompson, what say you?
I love the 10-point grading scale. A lot easier than trying to figure out 93s and 87s.
Yeah, I agree.
All that.
So just to clarify why the high school grading policy was brought into being on your front page there, I just gave you a very brief overview, but the current grading scale as a way to even the playing field for determining eligibility for the Hope Scholarship. Is everyone following along on the front page there? While grading practices traditionally have been set locally across the U.S., some states like Tennessee have moved to uniform systems out of growing concern about grade inflation for high-stakes awards. Even so, some districts still calculate GPAs using both the state's grading scale and their own, one to determine Hope eligibility and the 10-point scale to determine class rankings and valedictorians. Both are included on high school report cards and transcripts, with one designated as the Hope Scholarship GPA to indicate it's a required state calculation, meaning the 10-point scale was created to create at the high school level an even playing field for scholarships, specifically the Hope Scholarship. And if you look on the attached uniform grading policy, what we're discussing here is on page 2 of 6, and I've highlighted its letter D. LEAs may adopt a uniform grading system for grades pre-K through 8, or they may adopt a local grading scale for those grades. This is a hot topic with superintendents across the Upper Cumberland. I am part of the Superintendent's Study Council. We have some counties who are just doing the high school because it's state law, and they want to continue their consistency with the elementary schools. We have others who actually have middle schools who have included middle schools in this change of uniform grading policy, but not elementaries. And of course, the pre-K up through 2 has a completely different system of student grading. So, and that's not something that's included in this. So it's just grades 3 through 8, if that is a consideration, and there is no set decision across the Upper Cumberland. Each school system is deciding on their own. The only difference I've seen is, like I said, school systems that actually have middle schools will have the middle schools on the same grading policy as the high school. The other school systems using K-8 systems or different setups like that have just kind of stuck with their norm. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, just kind of some of the information that's flowing around.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve the grading system that the state has told us that we have to do for high school, to include it for grades 3 through 8 and 9 through 12.
Point. This policy does not address elementary grading scale. So we're not changing the policy. It clearly states that this decision made by the director and others. If you want to add that an elementary line to this, it'll have to go back to committee.
Is there a policy specifically for elementary?
To my knowledge, no. There may be a reference simply that locally, they make this local. It's a local decision on elementary grades and how they are computed and how they are done.
But we have to have some kind of policy for 3 through 8 grading scale somewhere, surely.
Well, I
Why
mean,
would we need one?
We've not.
Or it can be state law.
Policies oftentimes tend to make sure that we're following state law and that we're not going to fall behind or do something that's going to reflect poorly on Cumberland County schools. It states that this decision on elementary grading scales is a local decision, and it's essentially going to come from the superintendent, the director of schools, and whoever he allows some input. Otherwise, we're going to have to rewrite, we're going to have to add that to this policy, is my point. And this will not be in place.
Okay, I will withdraw my motion and suggest that we go back to policy. I mean, we'll go ahead and pass this because it's state law, but then we can.
You could make a motion at the completion of this to recommend that the director and Cumberland County Elementary Schools follow that grading scale.
Okay.
And that would certainly,
And to be added to the policy.
and if a policy needed to be written on that, then we could do it.
That becomes a procedure.
Yeah, the first 2 lines of this policy kind of very briefly discusses the
Right.
K-8 or pre-K, well, it's K-8, on how we can continue. That's the current policy.
Okay, I'm withdrawing that, my first motion, and I'll make a motion that we pass this policy with the recommendation that we task the director of schools to go back and look and see if we need to do a policy for K through 8 and see how we can do the grading system with the recommendation.
And what about the other policies that are up for first and second
And
reading?
we'll,
Or do you want to handle that as an individual one and then,
No,
and then we'll go with the other?
No, I'll include all those others as well, so we can go ahead and get through this,
I'll second your motion, Chairman.
okay? All right, so we've got a motion and a second. We're going to pass this grading scale for 9 through 12 with the recommendation, director look at the K through 8, and we're going to pass these other policies that Mr. Brock has mentioned. We're going to do first and second reading because this stuff needs to get in the student handbooks as fast as possible. Is there any further discussion?
Could you repeat
Yes.
your part of the motion? What are we doing? We're approving this.
We're approving
and you're
4.600 plus
you're
the
sending it
other,
back.
plus the other, oh, you want the last part of that?
Yes,
Okay, we're going to approve 4.600 as written
okay,
with the recommendation that the director of schools look at the K through 8 grading system and whether we need to have another policy for it or, but my recommendation is that we do the same grading system. But he will have to set those guidelines. Is that not what I said, Mr. Brock?
It is,
It's a-
but,
you're wanting,
I'm sorry.
I know we need to
If
be
we pass
specific.
these as written,
It's for the high
it'll
school.
simplify everything. And then, I'm sure the director is going to have to make a decision tonight or tomorrow morning or sometime, because those elementary schools, those teachers need to know what to start putting in their computers, what to have in their plan books, what, and everything. So, but that decision has to come out of this office. It can't come from policy tonight.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it could come from policy if the board's so inclined to waive the first and second reading and make an amendment to it, and then, how do I say, as a governing body, we can waive those procedures. And if this board so decided that it wanted consistency, and I'm not sure I recommend that without getting feedback from the director of schools, but, okay, but if we wanted to change that policy now, then a majority of board voting to change it could do that, and then we could approve those changes as a full board. It would be a two-step procedure. One, voting to waive the policy procedures, then add the K through 3 through 8 change to grades, and then vote on that. But okay.
Should this board decide to do that, I welcome you to do so. It would mean rewriting certain sections of this policy and doing it tonight with little forethought.
While the storm is going on.
Because here's the thing. The director of schools has the authority to decide at any moment he chooses what kind of grading scale elementary schools are going to be using.
So why are we getting involved?
Not if we make a policy.
Yeah, true,
We need to
true.
make a policy.
Well,
But it needs to be done. Look, if you want to write a policy tonight, Robbie, I welcome your input, and
I appreciate
I'll
that.
give you my copy.
All right.
I appreciate that.
I
Thank you.
understand where you're coming from, Mr. Safety, but I've made the motion, and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion?
On the question.
Okay. No further discussion. Then, now, we're voting to approve 4.600 and the other policies that Mr. Brock mentioned for first and second reading, because this information needs to get out there as fast as possible. And with the stipulation on 4.600, Mr. Stepp has to do his job to take care of the K through 8 on whatever direction he decides on. And then at some point in time, if this board wants to change policy, then we can go back to policy committee. Is that correct, Mr. Brock?
Absolutely. Or write a brand-new policy just to address elementary concerns.
I think
May I-
that's a wonderful suggestion, but I'm not up
Yes.
for
All
that.
right, we've got one more question before we vote. Ms. Boston.
The grading and assessment system shall be uniform, district-wide at comparable grade levels, except that the director of schools shall have the authority to establish and operate ungraded or unstructured classes in grades K through 3. So if I'm reading that correctly, the grading and assessment system shall be uniform district-wide.
That, ma'am, if you look on my handouts that I sent to you, it's actually split up by policy on high school grading policy directly.
Okay?
It does allow in that policy to include grades 3 through 8 if so desired by the school board through policy or by me or my designee. At this time, this would be what I would think is I don't feel comfortable making a knee-jerk reaction decision right now on grades 3 through 8. Most of my preparation has been trying to follow the state law on the high school grading policy. I would definitely very quickly like to have an option to meet with the experts or elementary principals to get their opinions so that we can be better educated on that. You'll notice in our policy at no time does it give an actual number for the grades K through 8. As far as their grading, it's just high school credit recovery. The one policy that does deal with elementary is promotion and retention.
Point of order. There was a call for the question.
Well, that's true. All right, so we need to vote. So, does everybody understand what we're voting on? I've repeated it about 4 times. Okay?
Could you explain to me? No.
I'll point of order.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we will expect Mr. Stepp and the elementary principals to get together as fast as possible to decide on the 3 through 8, but you know my opinion on it. And that doesn't mean anything. All right.
By the way, before the policy leaves, there are a lot more policies that we're going to be considering in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so if you had fun tonight, just stay tuned.
Yes, Ms. Boston.
Question.
Yes.
Just so I can clarify it.
Yes.
Mr. Stepp has the authority to determine the grading system for K through 8.
That's according to our policy and according to state law, he does.
Okay, then I'm happy with that. I got lost in the translation.
Yeah. Well,
Well-
we went through several different translations.
But whatever he decides through his feedback with the elementary school teachers, principals and teachers, then it certainly would be our prerogative to say this is a system issue, and we could then amend a policy or add a policy to do
And
that.
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure for right now, since school starts next week,
Right.
he has been given that authority, or he already has
He has that authority.
I don't care.
Yes, he has that authority.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. All right, Mr. Brock, we did all the second.
Yes, sir.
No, we've done the first and second readings together. We still like the second readings on these other policies, correct? Or did we?
We did first and second reading
You did first.
on the remaining policy.
4.210 and 4, yeah,
Yes.
okay, so we've got them all taken care of.
4.502 and 6.405.
Okay,
So we should be,
we've got all your policies taken care of then.
I pray.
Okay, well, next item is the athletic committee. Mr. Brock, you got anything to report?
I feel like I ought to make up something. I'd just like to say one thing. Dean Patton is doing an amazing job as athletic director, and he's handling the start of the athletic season in an amazing way. And so kudos to him. But that's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brock. All right, next is budget. Mr. King, you got anything to report?
Mr. Chair, nothing new.
All right, thank you, sir. Next is building and grounds. Mr. Safety.
I don't have anything to say. No.
I started to say, wait a minute.
We have met one time, and our discussion was on the Martin Elementary crosswalk. And of course, they are replacing the drain culvert in front of the parking lot with bigger pipes in hopes to drain more water from the front of the school. There was a discussion with the city and our maintenance director and the director of school that they would make this change, absorb the labor, but we would have to pay. They requested that we pay for the materials, and the Building Grounds Committee approved that. And I think, Mary, what was the final budget line for that piping, for the $6,900?
And I'd like to say a huge thank you to the city of Crossville for taking on this job, because this all came about because of the crosswalk that they're putting in, and the sidewalk that they're having to pour for handicap accessible was going to be running right across the top of our drain line. Well, if anybody knows anything about Martin, the drain over there has always not been very good, okay? And the reason is because we found out that there's only an 8-inch drain line that's under there, and they are replacing it for us with a 24-inch drain. So hopefully, Ms. Van Winkle, we won't have any cars underwater over there this year. But anyway, like I said, a huge thank you to the city of Crossville, because this is saving us a lot of money, because they're providing all the labor and everything. All we have to do is replace the pipe for them, and it's saving us a lot of money. All right, this came out of committee, so it doesn't need a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next is the Safety Committee. Ms. Hamby is not here, so we'll move on. Next is the Contract Committee. Ms. Boston.
Yes. Mr. Inman, if I might, the Martin Elementary culvert replacement, the 6,900, whatever, where is that money coming from?
Out of maintenance, out of
Is
their
it coming
budget.
just out of maintenance general budget? Yes, ma'am. Got it. Okay. We had a contract committee meeting. We had several contracts. They were all approved by the contract committee. The first one is a educational resource management consortium and an invoice. Second one is MOU for physician services with Cumberland County and Dr. Lauren Bergvin. Now, this came back to us amended with some wording that Dr. Bergvin is doing this as a labor of love. There is absolutely no, she does not charge for her services. And for that, we are grateful. An MOU with the Cumberland County School District and Avalon Center, TDOE Educator Preparation Agreement, the TNTP MAT implementation, and the Stellar Therapy Nursing. I'll entertain any questions. These did come out of committee. They were all recommended, and they were all discussed there thoroughly.
Does anybody have any questions on any of the contracts? We're going to vote on all the contracts all together. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, thank you, Ms. Boston. All right, next is the Chief Financial Officer's report. Who's going to do that one?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Bray, with an extensive background in finance, has been helping me keep everything afloat until we start doing interviews tomorrow for CFOs. So please welcome Ms. Bray up here to help with our June prelim financial report.
Well, first of all, Ms. Harris prepared this, so no worries there. Emphasis on preliminary. This is very preliminary. The county has not closed the books yet, so there'll still be some adjustments made to this. Talked to Mr. Brock today, probably 10 to 15 days before that happens. So there will be some changes. She put some notes at the bottom so that you guys could see that basically as far as revenues, we came in a bit below, but we still don't have the June sales tax, so that will change. As far as expenditures, we came in, looks like 5.4 million below, and there's reasons for that as well. And of course, with these preliminary numbers, it looks like we're going to be adding back to the fund balance instead of taking away from the fund balance, but again, very preliminary. So don't hold us to the fire on this because this will change.
Thank you for stepping up.
Thank you. Oh, it's not a problem.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Bray? You got lucky.
Been living right.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm really excited to see that sales tax report. Because if
Yeah.
anybody's been in Buc-ee's, all you hear is ka-ching, ka-ching,
Yeah.
ka-ching.
I'm glad Buc-ee's got opened before the end of the year.
Me too.
And thank you, Ms. Bray. She's
Yes.
been a great help to me keeping everything going, so I really appreciate your help.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bray. Okay, next item is the 141 budget amendments.
I'm going to move to approve all of them.
141, all three
All three of them.
All three of 141?
Yes.
Okay, got a motion for,
Second.
okay, got a motion by Ms. Carty, second by Mr. Brock. I think he got you just by a second. All right. Any discussion? Any questions on any of those three?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could, please.
Yes.
On the project reallocation budget resolution, we are moving 157,554 from the unassigned fund balance to increase maintenance of plant, maintenance repair for 90,000. What is that going for?
Well, these are projects that weren't completed by the end of the fiscal year, so we have to reallocate to be able to go to the building and grounds projects that need to be completed. So this
Yeah.
is
So we can
things
complete-
already approved, but was not completed by the fiscal year, as I understand. So we have to go through school board again to reallocate those monies.
Enough said.
Yeah, that was my question too, whenever I saw this. But yeah, it's stuff that just projects that did not get finished by the end of the budget. and we
Finish 'em
have-
up.
Yep, okay. All right, any further questions? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, hang on just a second now.
We have to do,
We need to do a roll
Roll
call
call.
vote, yes, because this is budget. I got in a hurry. So now this is on the 141 budget amendments. Mr. Safety,
Yes?
Ms. Parrish,
Yes.
Ms. Hale,
Yes.
Mr. Brock,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Aye.
Miss Boston,
yes.
Ms. Cargy.
Yes.
And chair votes yes, so those are passed. Okay, now we'll go on to 142 budget amendments.
Move to approve all.
Okay?
Second.
Ms. Cargy with the motion and Mr. King with the second. Is there any discussion on any of the 142 budget amendments? All right, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote again. Mr. Safety,
Yes?
Ms. Parrish,
Yes.
Ms. Hale,
Yes.
Mr. Brock,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Aye.
Ms. Boston,
Yes.
Ms. Cargy.
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So those are passed. All right, next item is the 143 budget amendment, which is the school nutrition program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Cargy with the motion, Mr. King with the second. Any discussion? All right. Ms. Cargy,
Yes.
Ms. Boston,
Yes.
Ms. Hamby. No, I'm sorry, Ms. Hamby. Mr. King,
Aye.
Mr. Brock,
Yes.
Ms. Hale,
Yes.
Ms. Parrish, and Mr. Savage.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. So that one is passed, okay? Next item is the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on any of the consent agenda? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Okay, next item is old business. All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Questions from the media? Do you have any questions? No questions. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you, everyone, especially the school leadership, central services that came out tonight to support this meeting. It's a lot of principals, so thank you guys for coming out and your support. Thank you, school board. I'm humbled to be here and excited all at the same time, so pretty fired up to get going with the school year. We got kids now live. It's awesome. So I'm excited to go, and thank you for your support.
Move to adjourn.
I've got a motion to adjourn. Here's a second. Mr. King, you second that? All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, hang around.
Quick on the draw.
Mr. Staff?